I understand that you did not audition any lead actors for C.O.G, is that right?
Yeah, my first film was like all auditions. I don't think there was anyone in the film that did an audition for it. And this time around, because I had my first film to sort of show for myself, I could just kind of go directly to people I liked. And I also learned, I love the casting process. Like I mean, we auditioned some people, like some of the day players, some of the smaller parts, you know, but everyone whose work I'd seen for me, I feel like, I heard a story recently about Chris Cooper auditioning for a movie, and I thought, what would you need Chris Cooper to audition for? Like, he's this amazing, brilliant actor. Like, what is he going to show you in an audition room? I think it was for like a big studio movie, so the network, or not the studio needs him to audition. But still, I felt like he's like one of the greatest actors of his generation. Like, what would you ask from him that he hasn't already shown he can do? But for me, it was a similar mind state of that, of just like, there's these actors that I just love. Like, I thought Corey Stoll just took Midnight in Paris had so many great performances in it, and here you had this guy who really had very little previous film presence before and stole the whole movie in just like 2 scenes, and it was like that feeling was like, I want to work with that guy, like no matter what. And that he wanted to do the part. I'm like, well, what am I going to have to, we talked about it, of course. I think you need to have, for me, I feel like for, especially lead parts, and you've seen someone's work before, and you generally trust them or know what they're going to do with it. For me, a meeting is more important. If you can talk about the character in a way that's simpatico, then you're going to be able to work together. That's more. I love the audition process. Just with this movie, I felt like if I had the opportunity to get people like Corey or Dennis O'Hare, who I've seen, he's done he's done everything. I've seen him do from like small parts in big studio movies to like being a crazy vampire or True Blood. Like he could do everything. So what is it that for me, that there's power in casting in terms of trusting someone's previous work. But like Jonathan, I hadn't seen the lead. I hadn't seen him do much. He didn't really have many film credits to his name. He was mostly known from stage and TV. And I'd seen him on Glee a little bit, but I didn't really know much about him. And then we met, and he had all these qualities I was looking for just from our sitting down at lunch. And we also got along a lot, which when someone's going to be in every scene of the movie and working every minute of every day, personality plays a huge part, independent of talent. But then he was doing a play downtown with Alfred Molina, where it was just the two of them on stage for 2 hours, and he was like so good in it. And I just thought, well, if he can hold his own against Alfred Molina for 2 hours without a break on stage, like I'm sure there's nothing this movie's going to throw his way that's going to be more challenging than that. And I think the instincts were right. He was better than I anticipated. Like it's the thing I'm proudest of most in the movie is his work in it. And I think it's going to surprise a lot of people who were familiar with him before, but also introduce him to a lot of people who weren't familiar with him, and because he's just really likable and has all these sort of great star qualities. I hope that when people see the film, that they really love him in it. So,
getting to the part where I'm sure a lot of directors don't want to be in, how do you tell someone they're not right for a part? That's always a touchy thing. Maybe you like them as a person, maybe they're a brilliant actor, but they're just not the part. How do you?
It's tough. It's weird because I've stayed friends since we did a lot of auditioning on Easier Practice. I've stayed friends with some of the people that we got close to casting but ultimately didn't, and it was I usually stayed in touch with them because I loved them so much. In fact, the audition, one of the things I like about auditioning is finding all these great people that might not be right for the movie, but you keep them in mind for the next one. And for me, it's weird. Yeah, someone can be, and it's hard because it's an argument you always end up having to have with producers, because they're going to be like, well, or executive types, like, well, there's this big name and we'd love to get him, and it's like, well, yeah, he's a great actor, but he's not right for this. Not, I don't always believe the biggest name is the best name, but to go back to even someone who might just not be right for the part, it can be really hard, because just because you love someone and maybe you really wanted to work with them doesn't mean it's always gonna fit right. And it's just, I don't know what it is. Casting, I think, only is instinct. I really, really believe that. I mean, I think there's responsibility sometimes financially, but I think if you're making a movie relatively cheaply, you just need to trust your instincts on it 100%. I really believe that, and it's hard because I think if I've ever argued with financiers the most, thing about the most, it's casting. Because I think at the end of the day, if you don't have any money and you don't have any time, as long as you have a camera and like a decent looking space, if you have great actors, like you can have something amazing. And so I've always fought for independence in casting. I always have, and of course it makes maybe a movie more challenging to sell or whatever. But at the end of the day, I can stand by it more. I think independent film has become kind of fueled a lot by the casting process. So you get all these small movies with kind of big names, or like people who haven't just like hype names. I try not to serve into that at all. I try to just cast someone based off what I think of them, but that can create a lot of opposition too. On this film it didn't. I think people were really excited, everyone kind of knew that Jonathan was in a place to do something like this, and everyone knew Corey was, you know, I mean, it was before any of us had seen House of Cards, but House of Cards has elevated him so much, but we all knew he was in a place for that. And same with, I mean, Dennis is just, he's one of those guys that's been acting for so long and done so much amazing work that for me, I just didn't even, for me it was like, it's got to be him. Like I love his work so much, and I think everyone loves him in the film, you know, so there was never any, you know, we got lucky, but also that's because I passed on a lot of opportunities to make this film without casting control. So I made sure that by the time I did get to make it, it was with the understanding that I was going to cast this film the way I wanted to cast it. And I fought for that and had to wait a long time for that, but it ended up being worth it.
I don't know if you saw Sean Baker's Starlet.
I haven't seen it yet, but I'm dying. I know Sean, and I've been dying to see it.
Yeah, and he cast one of this older lead beside Ka Johnson just by seeing her at the YMCA.
Yeah, that's what I heard. That it was like him and I know Blake, the producer he works with too, that just like saw her and thought she'd be right for it.
She was excellent. Yeah, and the chemistry between she and Dree was amazing. So was there anyone like that where you just kind of saw them in passing or just...
I've always wanted that. You know, you always hear those stories. I've always wanted that to like what... I almost did once in my first film. I remember we were having trouble finding the right person for the lead, and Brian, who ended up coming in for it, was like the last person to come in, not because we didn't want to see him, but because he was busy, I think, shooting Hurt Locker at the time, so he just wasn't even available. I remember one time I was at the Warner Brothers commissary and saw someone that I was like, he looks right for the part. He just, and Cookie, my producer, was like, let me just go see if would be interested, and he ended up being like, no, I'm not an actor. But it was one of those things where like that's like my dream, to just like find someone like that. It's never, yeah, exactly, where you just like see someone and you know that they're right. It hasn't happened to me yet, but I certainly want that to happen at some point. I think would be great. But what I do try to do, the variation of that, is I try to always, even if I see someone like in a commercial that I think was like really interesting or kind of funny, like I try to look them up, or someone who might have a bit part in a, you know, I've met a lot of actors that way, where I see them in like one scene of an episode of a show and think they're really interesting, and then you bring them in for an audition and you meet them, and then you end up really liking them, and then sometimes they end up like their careers end up like exploding off without you having had any influence on that. But I think it's good to be aware of that and to try to write those names down, and I have like a huge running list of just people I think are interesting that way. Haven't totally ended up casting anyone from it yet, but I've met a lot of great people that way.